Hi, this is Rene. Thank you for listening. I'm the conversation part of this team. I directly communicate with spirits that exist on the other side. I was born in Linthicum Heights, Maryland, on the outskirts of Baltimore City. It's a sleepy little suburban community where there were many kids my age to hang out with. This was back when you could do many things that you can't do now. There was nothing special about me, although I did know there was something strange living in the house I grew up in. Never saw anything, just knew something dark lived there with us. This was later confirmed by my friend Myrna, a psychic medium. Once I did have a premonition in a dream that did materialize. That was the extent of my spiritual abilities back then. I was always into music. My parents had a record player in our den, and I spent many hours listening to Doris Day, Chubby Checker, Johnny Mathis, and Frank Sinatra. As I got older, the music changed to Janis Joplin, the Raspberries, Chicago, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Aerosmith, Pink Floyd. You get it. I kept my radio on at night. It distracted me from the silence in our house and the fear that I lived with. And I just loved listening to music. In the 80s, after 2 kids and a divorce, I got a job in radio. Not as a jock, but in sales. I didn't care. I was near the music. All I could do was listen. I can't play an instrument, and I can't sing either, although Chris Cornell said my voice isn't so bad when I'm serious. My radio experience benefited me in life. I could write copy and voice ads. After my relocation to North Carolina, I got a job in the banking industry. I was asked to go to the local radio station and voice an ad, and there was Brian, my musical muse. He's a walking music history book, someone who could talk for hours about the industry. We have a little place in Carolina Beach, North Carolina, along with 4 dogs, 2 cats, 3 parakeets, and an aquarium. I had an interest in the paranormal, but didn't really explore it until I met someone who also had an interest in learning about it. We attended lectures and classes on many topics, and I loved learning new things. It wasn't until my job at a local magazine led me to Myrna that I experienced contact with the other side. I'm a pretty decent writer, at least I think so anyway, and I decided to write a story about her and her abilities. Despite my impressive spiritual resume, I'd never experienced a reading, and in order to write a proper article, it required me to participate in one. I had no idea that this act would change my life. Through Myrna, I began to have conversations with my family and friends that had crossed over. The topic of writing came up during every reading, and they were encouraging me to write a book. Then, during a session in 2019, Edgar Allan Poe presented, asked if he could write through me. I agreed, and this began my opening, the ability to communicate with the other side of my own. I wrote 2 books of poetry with Edgar, and he and others like Norman Mailer, Ernest Hemingway, and Jim Morrison are on my writing team. They coach and help when I ask. Brian decided to get a reading from Myrna. His dialogue explains this part of our history and the birth of the podcast.
I knew from the age of 7 that I wanted to be on the radio. I had a transistor radio and listened to music and the Dodgers games, things I still do today, although the transistor has since been replaced. Born in New Rochelle, New York, we moved to San Diego when I was a child. My first radio job was at KREL in Corona, California. Since then, I've worked around the country at some of the top radio stations and been lucky to work in different formats, which has given me a diverse taste and knowledge in music. Over the years, I got tired of moving around the country and decided to put down roots in Wilmington, North Carolina. This is where I met my wife, and she introduced me to the afterlife through her friend Myrna, a psychic medium. I have always been a spiritual person, and when I saw what Myrna was able to do, I decided to try it for myself. I wanted to speak with my parents and other friends and relatives. My first reading was in November 2019. Rene was present for moral support, and I was thrilled when I got to speak to my parents and some friends who had passed over. During the reading, Myrna announced that Prince, yes, Prince, wanted to thank me for helping him get his career off the ground. And then he left. I was a program director in Detroit and came across this new artist that had a sound like no one else. So I played Prince's records, and soon his music was playing all over Detroit, then the country, and finally the world. We were all very excited about this pop-in and decided to have another reading soon. February 2020 was my next reading, and there was a crowd waiting to speak with me. Casey Kasem, Michael Hutchins, Sid Barrett, Sid Vicious, Jim Morrison, Freddie Mercury, John Lennon and George Harrison, and Charles Manson. He considered himself a musician. Each artist told us about their lives here and the difficulty of being an artist. Most all were very critical of the way they were treated by the music industry. Agents, promoters, and the record companies themselves were very abusive and uncaring about the welfare of our beloved musicians. I was aware of the difficulty that faced artists. I dealt with record companies on a different level, but you hear the stories. When we spoke to John and George, they agreed with what others had told us and indicated that it would be helpful if someone told their stories, especially about the abuse they suffered at the hands of those who were supposed to be supporting them. We told them that we would be their voice. We would tell their stories to the world, and our podcast was born. Over the course of my career, I've met many musicians and conducted many interviews, but nothing nearly as exciting as the project we are undertaking now. Now what? How do we pass the word through our podcast? How do you do a podcast? Well, it wasn't that hard, and here we are. We changed the format for Season 2, and we hope you like it. We started this project at the request of artist souls who want to continue communication with our dimension. This is their forum, their place to communicate with us, tell their stories as they want them told, setting the story straight about who they were here, their lives, their death, and their experiences on the other side, the afterlife. We hope you enjoy this experience.
Everyone is born with psychic abilities. They're built into this human body that we inhabit during this journey. It's up to you whether or not you use them. The universe says, ask, and you shall receive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us. Join Celebrity Souls Speak on Facebook at facebook.com/The Celebrity Souls Speak. And check out Renee's blog at commonsenseinwilmingtonnc.blogspot.com. Sense spelled CENTS.